Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of iWoofs with your host, Dr. Ian Dunbar. Hello there. Kelly Dunbar.
Hi.
And me, Jamie Dunbar.
We
I don't know why we can't get through this
No,
without everyone
we
chuckling up.
It's
your clap.
Well, you got it. It's what you do beforehand. It just cracks me up. We don't have a clapperboard, so Jamie goes.
Very common, but
You clap much better than me.
yes.
Okay, what's the myth this week?
Yes, well, as you notice in our clothes, we're
This week.
we're doing our whole myth
It's
series
the
in
mythical
one day.
series. Yeah.
Well,
And our next myth that we're going to be talking about is myths in food in training. So, kind of the starter myth being that all food in training constitutes a bribe, and so this I think prevents a lot of people from using food because they don't want to bribe their dogs. So, have you guys heard that?
They have. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they have this idea that their dog should just want to intrinsically or inherently work for them.
I wanted
Because-
to want to do it.
Because I'm already rewarding him. I feed him every day. I pet him. We play. We go for walks.
Mm-hmm.
So the exchange is, you listen to me. You know,
Right.
and why should I have? It cheapens the love and the relationship to have to pay for it. Can you imagine saying that to anyone in your life? You know.
Well, I think a lot of people do say that.
Well,
It doesn't get them very far.
Especially employees.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to call them slaves.
Don't you just love working for Sirius? So they say they do. Next time someone says, "I love working for Sirius," I'll say, "Oh, great, then we'll cancel your paycheck."
Right.
You know, you love us so much. We're doing such a good job. It doesn't do anything to enhance the relationship. So there is this. It's an insult to people. First of all, you can't. A bribe is actually poor training. So that people are right to say they don't want to bribe their dog.
Oh, absolutely.
So that part isn't a myth. So the myth is that using food, which you already said, using food in training is
Necessarily a bribe.
constitutes a bribe.
Mhm.
Because I do understand why you wouldn't want to bribe your dog. Though I do
So-
not understand why you wouldn't want to reward your dog.
Yeah, and the difference is that bribing, the dog gets the food, but we don't get the behaviour. We don't get compliance, as all parents and politicians know.
You're saying the difference is whether or not you get the behavior?
Yeah, so let's just define there's four major uses of food as a lure. A lure is presented beforehand to entice a willing dog to do what you want it to do, so it learns what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
So a lure is to teach the dog what you want him to do. It is no good us just saying to a dog, "Latte chai, paisy paisy." He doesn't speak Swahili, so he can't do it. Well, he doesn't speak English either. A reward comes afterwards as a surprise, not promised. It's a consequence for doing the behavior to reinforce the behavior so the dog's more likely to do it in the future. A bribe is promised beforehand to an unwilling dog to get it to act against its will.
Mhm.
All right? So when we started, just from a scientific viewpoint, everyone was, "I don't want to bribe the dog, I'm not using food." And I said, "I don't want to bribe dogs either. We're using food as a lure and a reward." Excuse me. And a major part of the Sirius program was using food as a lure and phasing it out so quickly so that week one, they have a go with no food in their hand.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Which I think is another common myth, is that if you use food, you'll have to use food forever.
forever. No, there's so many ways to phase it out. And the first is you just put it in your pocket or hold it in the other hand.
That
Lure
said,
with this hand.
you can't just teach and reward only up front at the beginning of teaching and then never reward somebody again.
No.
So that's, you
And
don't give someone a first paycheck and
the
And
next
expect
step,
them to work
yeah.
pro bono for the
Yeah.
rest of it.
Yeah.
The next step was phasing food out as a reward and a series of process, asking more for less. 1 puppy push-up per treat, then 20 puppy push-ups, 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 push. And then putting them on a differential reinforcement. So we're thinning out food rewards, but then we replace them entirely with things that the dog likes better. Like
Mhm.
what? Getting on the couch, getting you to throw a tennis ball.
Mhm.
So it's sit, throw the tennis ball. The dog works that one out quickly.
Mhm.
So easily, in fact, that the dog probably goes to a dog next door and says, "Hey, I've taught my owner to throw a tennis ball. It's incredible. All I have to do, I've got a great command. You just sit and look at them.
Mhm.
And they pick up a ball and throw it, So we replaced food we get rid of food as a lure. We replace it as a reward. in obedience
Very
training.
quickly. You have to repeat
Yeah,
that.
you-
I mean,
yeah.
it's
Very
so,
quickly. Weeks
because
1
a
and 2
lure
and 3.
is technically a bribe.
No,
it's a
no,
prompt,
no,
it's
no,
a
no. The
prompt.
difference is the dog is willing. It's like
But we
this.
don't know if they're willing, do we?
Okay, well, I can ask you a question. I know whether you're willing. If I said, would you like to learn Swahili?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I said no. And then you say, I'll give you
Then you're
a
not
trip
willing.
to McDonald's if you want to learn. And then I'd say, okay, then I'll learn. So that's a bribe.
Yeah.
That would be
But
a
if I
bribe.
said, yes, I do want to learn Swahili, and you're like, that's great.
Good.
Afterwards, we'll go to McDonald's. Now you're
Yeah.
saying that's a reward because I was willing.
Yes.
Okay.
If
So,
you, no, a lure.
But it's different.
If you're willing.
It's different. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. There's three
No,
things.
let's get this. It's right. The
Bribes,
big difference.
lures, which is a prompt.
rewards.
Allures and bribes are presented before the behavior. The big difference is a lure is to teach a willing dog. I mean, the puppy's sitting and looking at you, and you say down, and the puppy goes oh,
Okay, well, what?
and then you lure him down.
Let's say
With
we're
a
trying
bribe, well, I want to say,
Uh-huh.
it must get it quite clear so we understand. A bribe is to coerce an unwilling dog.
Mhm.
So the notion is with a bribe, the dog knows what you want him to do, just doesn't want to do it.
Mhm.
With a lure,
Good
the
point.
notion is the dog hasn't a clue what you want him to do when you say
Right.
sit or roll over, so the lure is to teach him to want to do it.
Although I feel like what we spend a lot of time explaining to people is that often it's not a question of, like, we say that often people believe their dog knows how to do something. And we're saying that actually their dog doesn't know in this context. So, for example, if we have a dog that sits when it's focused on us, but right now it's over there sniffing, and we ask it to sit, is it unwilling because it's sniffing, or does it not know what to do because it's in a different context?
Either both.
Well,
And does it matter?
It could be
are
either.
we allowed
it could
to?
be either. It would depend on assessing.
Does it hurt to lure the dog?
firstly,
if it's not paying
let's
attention
make a
to
big
us?
distinction. We are not teaching dogs to sit. They know how to sit.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we're teaching them to sit on cue.
Yes.
So now the question is, how compliant is the dog when we say sit?
Mhm.
Well, if it's you in the kitchen and you've got his food bowl, pretty compliant.
Mhm.
You move to the living room, the level of compliance as measured by, response reliability percentage. So we give a percentage score.
Right.
How many times do you say sit? Does your dog sit? Or how many commands does it take to get the dog
So is
to
that
sit?
a sign of unwilling?
I would say it's a sign of increasing complexity of the distractions to the point where the dog says, why should I sit in front of you? I've got you anytime I
Right.
like when there's a squirrel or there's a smell.
Mm-hmm.
So the dog doesn't comply. That doesn't mean to say he's dissing you or being dominant. He just
Or
doesn't comply in that
unwilling.
Well,
setting.
there's also the
Yeah.
possibility that they really don't know. If you're really just using verbals and you have trained verbals,
Right.
and contextually your dog was sitting in the kitchen because they learned that context.
Yeah.
If you change context and you're
Right.
just saying the word that they never learned,
Right.
which that's a whole other thing,
And
Right.
so the solution is...
then they really just
yeah.
don't even know what you're saying.
If you say, come here, and the dog says,
Mhm.
I'd rather be playing over here, the only way to resolve this is, so now praise is no good, food is no good, the only reward to use in training is playing with other dogs. The distraction, when you have a dog that's distracted, that must become the reward. So what we have to teach to the dog is, when I say sit, it doesn't mean sit forever and you'll never get to look at squirrels again. Or
Mhm.
never get to play with other dogs again. Instead, we say sit lots and interrupt play, and every time the dog sits, we say, good dog, go play.
Mhm.
So now, go play is a reward that reinforces training, rather than being a distraction that destroys training and makes owners really upset.
So is that to say that if your dog is interested in something other than food at this moment, then using food is a bad idea?
No,
You-
I'm just
you-
saying it probably won't work.
Well, you don't get to choose
Um,
what somebody else wants, what's reinforcing for
Right.
another being. And
Like if we were in
that's-
puppy class and the puppies are sniffing each other, but I want the puppy to come over here and sit, don't you usually start by luring that behavior with us?
Let's take the example of Zuzu today when you came in with all the camera equipment and lights. And what does she do? She gets excited. She's pleased to see you.
Mhm.
So what did I do? I said, Zuzu, sit. Tranquilo. And we calmed her down. And
Mhm.
after she sat, I said, Zuzu, be silly. And she got up and she went all crazy again.
Yeah.
But now she's not touching you and pouring at you. So the distraction and the dog's behavior, that has to be the reward. We can't stop dogs from barking. We
Mhm.
can't stop them from being happy and joyful and jumping up and down.
Right.
But we can put it on cue so we can use it in a reward for training. And if you just yo-yo, down stay, be silly. Down stay, play with other dogs.
Right, but
Down
that's
stay.
a whole different thing.
That's
It's
not-
life rewards. I
Life
understand
rewards,
that
yeah.
life rewards are very important. But we're talking about food and when
and
is the
replacing
appropriate
food.
time to use food.
Yeah.
You can only use food if the dog is interested in what you've got at that moment. More interested
The
in what
food.
you've got food-wise
Uh-huh.
or toy-wise. I mean, a lure can be a toy. It can be your voice. It can be running away.
Mhm.
For instance, if a dog, adolescent dogs often become quite unreliable as
Mhm.
you're working with them, and I often teach my puppy clients, and then certainly practice with adolescents, the chase game
Mhm.
as to use me as a lure.
Mhm.
Because no, food really might not work if they're that far away or if they're
Right.
that excited. So I like to first install a playful game that they're accustomed to, that they love. Like, never chase your dog, have them chase you.
Yeah.
Run the other way, fall down, let them attack you, play, jump, jump, jump. And you can have a word for that or whatever it may be, and then your dog is running amok and you feel like you've lost control of the situation. You don't shout at them, sit isn't working, come isn't working, and you're probably sounding nervous or angry. You must get silly and run the other way, and that becomes a lure,
Right.
where food might not work. So a lure can be more than one thing,
I think
and
that
more than food.
the question is, why do we use food? And I would say there's two reasons, okay? Most important reason is classical conditioning. If you have a 5-month-old dog, like was a year-old dog walked by yesterday, absolutely scared of me. And I knew the owner and said, would you like me to run in and get some food? Because I gave her a bag of Ziwi Peak the other day.
Mhm.
And it's the only way. I can't do the things I want to do with this poor little dog. I can't go up and hug it. He's scared of me. He's scared of if I approach. He's scared if I touch him.
Mhm.
But food, tossed it over his head. Before you knew it, this dog's my best friend.
Mhm.
So food is absolutely mandatory for classical conditioning. Why do we use it in obedience training? Because the owner couldn't do it otherwise. The owner could not get a dog to sit. Physical prompting is very complicated. But if you tell them, let's say a 4-year-old child, you say, stand in this circle, put your left hand in your pocket, hold food in your right hand, and lift it up and down. And the dog's sitting and lying down. So we use food in their hand as a lure because otherwise they couldn't get the dog to come, to sit, to lie down, to roll over. Why do we use food as a reward? Because the average owner can't praise. It is a joke in my seminar. I said the average owner can't praise.
Mhm.
I mean, my seminar, I say, right, all the guys stand up. And I say, I'm a little Yorkie. I just went pee, praise me. And they say, good dog.
Mhm.
Then I have the front row, usually ladies. I say, right, mark them out of 10. 1, 2, 0. I say, Russian judge, right? And then 11. And then another guy may say, well, it's a good boy, it's a good boy. So I said, that was praesus interruptus. You started off great, but then you petered out.
Mhm.
People cannot praise. What they can do, though, is say, good dog, treat.
Mhm.
Now you think about this. I mean, think how we teach dogs, like an emergency command that's going to be shouted.
Mhm.
We reverse the meaning of tone and volume very simply by saying, Rover, sit. Thank you. Rover, sit. Good dog.
Mhm.
Rover, sit. Good dog. Treat, 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 treat. Rover, sit.
Yeah.
Good dog. And then loads of treats. So if they just say, good dog, and give a bit of food, good dog now becomes a secondary reinforcement.
Okay,
Means
so
food.
people need to understand why food is used in training. Which you're explaining that it's a primary reinforcer.
They couldn't get the dog to do
No,
it,
but
so they had to lure,
why do we use
and they
food?
couldn't praise.
Because people need food.
Yeah.
Because dogs need food. They all eat. It's a primary reinforcer.
And they can't praise.
And why? And you do need to. Well, you don't need to praise, but why wouldn't you want to reward your dog? You want a classical condition, like more specifically.
Mhm.
You would like to use food in training because it's a primary reinforcer. All dogs do eat, need to eat.
Mhm.
It's something you can manipulate and use to your advantage. That
Mhm.
every dog at some point will not reject, right? They will probably have a good
Mhm.
conditioned response to, right? It helps you then condition response of other secondary reinforcers, right? It's readily available. And then we kind of still have to address the idea of he should do it for me because, you know, that's really the myth is not, I mean, they get that food works, but they think it's a bribe. So we've done that part. But also they're the people that just want their dog to do it for them. And what is your dog's reason for working for you if you don't pay them with food? And people think that there are plenty of reasons their dogs should work for them without paying them. I guess they think that the delayed payment of dinner tonight is enough. So we have to talk about the timing of the reward. You know, all the good life things you do. Life rewards don't work if they're not preceded in training, if they're not preceded by training, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just have random life rewards. That's relationship building. It's not learning.
I think, I mean, the whole, I want him to do it for me. I want him to do it because he wants to do it. I mean, that's cool. I want Zuzu to do it because I want her to want to do it. But that's the end product. But when you're in a family, this, I want to do it for me, I think can be very damaging. You know, if, say, you're a woman, you have a husband. Yeah, you can get the dog to do it for you because you've got a relationship. But your husband's talking like this and the dog won't do it for him, so now he gets mad at the dog. What about the children? They don't have your experience and expertise. They can't do it. So the dog's all over the place and the child's self-esteem is crushed. So I just say, let's use a food lure. The dog then understands what you want to do, and let's use a food reward because then it rewards.
I mean, I think the important thing is if you want the dog to do it for you, then using food is a step in that process.
It's part of the relationship building and the classical conditioning.
Right.
It's the classical conditioning and the relationship building, and absolutely, and you cannot. Again, I think I hit on something there, which is you cannot use a life reward. Because that's what they really want to do. These people want to use life rewards. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't use a life reward as a delayed reinforcement. It's got to be part of the training routine.
Well, and you can't use a life reward if the dog doesn't know what you want to do. So the whole point thing is food as a lure, absolutely essential. It's the quickest way to train, proven by science. Sorry, end of point. Back to the original question. I don't want to use food because it's a bribe. I would say now, yeah, I think food has become a bribe again. Why? Because we forgot that we use food as a lure, we use it as a reward, then we phase it out as a lure and use hand signals instead and verbal commands, and we thin it out as a reward using other rewards. But what we must prove is we don't want a dog that only does it when we've got food.
Absolutely.
And that's what's happening in training now, that people are giving food week 6 in a training class. They haven't phased it out. And we must prove that. Okay, and the process is very simple. So from practical viewpoints, you first food in your hand and you do some repetitions. Is that?
It's Laz, but also.
Oh, you didn't even mention his name.
No, this
is that the neighbour's dog?
This is getting. This is getting long.
Let me just finish this really quickly. How do you phase out food then? Food in the hand to lure. Okay, you do it a few times. Then you just do it with an empty hand, and you think, oh wow, they're really good on hand signals. Yeah, we're speaking their language, body language. Now what you do is this: I give the food to you, and I train the dog. Okay, and it's difficult to do, but eventually the dog sits, and when I say good dog, you feed him. Then I put the food on the table. What does the dog do? He looks at the food. I'm not going to talk to the dog till he glances at me. I say, good boy, give him the food. Keep doing that, shaping. Now he has to look at me for a second, then 2, then 3, then 4. Now I put food over there as a distraction and a reward. He's sitting in front of me, paying attention to me, and I can say, good boy, get the food, give it to him. So we must do that. We must prove that after all this training, the dog works and does it for you happily when you don't have food on you.
So for all of the trainers out there, the best way to convince people to use food in training and that it isn't a bribe is actually to phase it out as quickly as possible.
Yes.
I think that's the take-home point.
I like that.
It's not a bribe if you're phasing it out.
Yep, and that begins the first week in class.
Yep.
It's a training
Or before you get to class, if you've read your homework. Homework is prior to class homework.
So,
well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.